All right, so all is working well. And the other thing we can do, let me put this on a different line here. And so obviously we can add more parameters into our calculate function here. But usually you want to minimize the number of parameters because you don't want to end up with a function that has 200 parameters. That's exaggerating, of course, but it could very well happen. So we need to minimize the number of parameters we pass. But in this case, I'm just going to pass at least another one here. Let's call this a message. And it's going to be a string that's expected. And you can see at the top now we have a problem, and it's expecting a message to be added there. So that means right there, I'm going to say message. Right here, I'm going to say is multiple of as such. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. Like that. Let me put this perhaps in a new line so we can see everything better. And you can see that we have our message in our parameter in the calculate function here. It's grayed out to say that it hasn't been used. In fact, if you have over, it's going to say remove parameter message because it's never used. But we're going to use that. So we're going to just remove all of that and pass it that message parameter as such. Okay, let's go ahead and give it a run. Again, we can run from here, but let's just go ahead and run from here. So nothing really has changed much, but we know that we've restructured our function here. Okay, now we're passing this message string and we pass something into it. Okay, a message. So you can see the flexibility we get with functions passing parameters, because we can change any of these arguments that we've been passing here to whatever we want. And of course, the function itself will be fed all of these parameters, and we can use those parameters inside of the function to do whatever we want to get a certain result. And that is indeed the whole existence of a function, which is to take values and do some work and return or show a result. Now, another concept we want to get at in this video is the concept of a default argument. What does that mean? Well, it means that we can actually add default values to some of these parameters here to say that when we call, we can skip those arguments. We can actually skip, meaning we don't have to add anything. If nothing is found for that parameter or argument, then the default value will be used. For example, here for first there, I can just say is equal and pass, let's say 11. Okay, that's fine. And for second, I can also say is equal to 1000. What do we have there? Okay, so I'm going to run this. Obviously, everything should run as before. But then I'm going to change a few things. So everything is great. Life is great. We're all happy. And that's wonderful. So now I'm just going to go ahead and comment this one out there so we can invoke a new function. The same, but a new expression here. I'm going to say calculate. And you can see I go like this, enter. And now you can see at the top here that it says first int is 11. The reason why is because it's saying, well, the first argument has a default value of 11, second default value of 100. So in this case here, if I just go straight and pass, let's say, a message, say, is multiple of, and then go to of, and then add multiple of, which is 11, like that, you notice that we have a problem, because since we said that once we have default values, we can skip those arguments. We don't have to call it, because the compiler will know if there's nothing for first or second, it's going to go ahead and add our default values, right? But we have a problem here. And you can see right away the problem is very apparent, because if you see here, it says first is multiple of and second is 11. So what's happening here is we must add something else in order for this to work whenever we are passing default values, which is named argument. So what happens if we don't add a named argument to say actually first, or in this case this is multiple of, it's going to be a message, as you will see in a second here. The compiler will assume that whatever you're passing is going to follow the order in which we've added these parameters. As you can see, it's thinking that this is our first parameter we're passing, which is not true. So how to fix that? To fix that, we actually use named parameters, which means in this case, I'm going to say message like that, and voila, it works. And for 11 here, we know it's going to be multiple of. You can see it now works. If I run this, I run from here, that's fine. We'll see the same results, but we know that something has changed, which means we didn't have to pass the first or the second arguments because they have indeed their default values. If I change this to 1, for instance, and run, it will take 1 and 1000 for the second argument. Let's see what the result is going to be. And voila. Okay. So now you see it's working. Now, it doesn't mean that once I have default values in our arguments here, actual parameters, it doesn't mean that we can override those values, because the idea, of course, is to give a chance or is to make our functions customizable, right? So we can override them, meaning that we can actually pass the values. But remember, in order for this to work, you have to add the named parameters. So I have to say first such and give it a value of 11. And then I'm going to say second and give it a value of 1000. I'm just using the same number so we don't get confused, but you can add any number you want, right? So now you actually, just to show you, let's say this is 20 and this is 100, like that. So to show you that indeed it's going to override the default values. Let's run. You can see now I went ahead and overrode the default values. In fact, I can even make it further by saying 12, so you can see the difference really. Let's run. Okay, you see 12, because that is the value we passed for multiple of. And you can see beyond just the apparent advantages of having default values to our arguments, also we get to be forced to add the actual arguments, right? The names of these arguments. And you can see it's really nice. It looks better, especially once you start adding more and more arguments, or parameters in this case, for the function call there. You can see that it's much easier for you or any other programmer that may be using your function to know exactly what's expected to pass. Because now I know for the first, it's name argument, it's going to be whatever I want to add, for the second, and so forth. Now, obviously, you see at this point, because we have second and everything is laid out, I can remove these named arguments, right? And everything will work just fine in some cases. But it's always a good idea. As you can see also, the IDE gives us this visual representation of each one of these arguments, saying this is the first, second, and message. But it's always nice to actually type them out so that we have that aid, visual aid.